Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Season's greetings. Happy holidays. Emerson Phillips with Gamecock Central columnist Scott Davis. Scott, Merry Christmas. How was Santa? Was Santa good to you?
Merry Christmas to you, Emerson. Merry Christmas to Gamecock Nation, and Happy New Year coming up. I had a great holiday. Santa was very kind to me as always, so I was pretty happy with my gifts, and I hope everybody else was too. And I celebrated by eating about 15 pounds of Christmas food yesterday.
Give us an idea. Tell us one thing you got, Scott. Was it all socks and sweaters, or did you get something really good?
I did get some clothes, which I was very excited about getting and needed. Got some gift certificates to restaurants and things like that, so I will be looking stylish while I'm eating good food, so that's always good.
Scott's new column is up on Gamecock Central. We invite you to check it out. Scott's a Gamecock alum, and he's a lifetime Gamecock fan. He brings us a fan's perspective each week, and the headline of his column this week is a Gamecock's New Year's Resolutions. So, Scott, Christmas is over now, and we're about ready to turn our attention to New Year's Eve and the bowl season and all that, and the start of a new year here. And that means it's time for the time-honored tradition for many of us of making promises that we know we're never going to keep in the new year.
Exactly. That's what this time of year is really good for. And I started thinking about whether I wanted to make New Year's resolutions or not this year, and I realized that there's very little reason for me to do so because I'm probably not going to make good on any of them. So I decided instead to think about how I could approach following the Gamecocks in 2018 and beyond, and what I might do differently in the future. And so that was the genesis of what I started when I began the column. And I think some of these I may actually be able to keep. We'll see.
Scott, you said it's not very likely that you're going to start going to the gym on a regular basis in 2018, something you might want to do or like to do or need to do, but that's probably not going to happen. So you propose a resolution revolution in 2018. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I did. I think the main thing I would stress in reading this column is that I'm talking specifically about me and how I want to maybe make some changes with how I follow watching the Gamecocks. And I'm not telling anyone how they should follow the team. In fact, that's a later point in the column that I'll get to in this discussion. But watch the Gamecocks however you enjoy watching them. But for me, there are a couple of things that I think I could do differently, starting with maybe staying as far away from social media as I can on two fronts. One, I found myself getting into this arms race of sorts to try to be, one of the funnier people who writes about South Carolina and making sure that I always had a quote-unquote witty tweet ready regardless of whatever was happening in a football game or basketball game. And I'm not sure that really needs to be the best use of my time. I just need to watch the games and respond accordingly to what happens. And the second part of that is probably need to stay away from social media in the heat of the moment, especially after a bad loss. That never seems to go well for me. I remember earlier this year, after South Carolina's basketball team went one and done again for what seemed like the 1,000th year in a row in the SEC tournament, I jumped on Twitter and just ranted about my frustration and why it was so inexplicable to me that the Gamecocks couldn't seem to do anything in that tournament no matter what the situation was. And, of course, they responded by making the Final Four immediately after that and rendering those tweets completely ridiculous, which I was very happy for them to become. So maybe I just need to take an hour or two after a game to figure out exactly what my thoughts are.
So Scott has resolved to step away from the phone and the computer more in 2018, stay off of social media and less knee-jerk reactions to what's going on with the Gamecocks, and you're going to pay more attention to what the Gamecocks have got going on the fields and courts this coming up year.
Exactly. I think, for me, I just think it will enhance my enjoyment of the games. I don't need to be thinking about what I'm going to say on Twitter when I'm watching a game. I just need to watch the game, and then we'll go from there. So that's going to be something I take a shot at doing in the coming months.
Scott, one other thing that you'd like to see less of in 2018 is fans telling other fans the right or wrong way to conduct themselves.
That's right. I really do. And by the way, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, if the way that you enjoy watching sports is to tell other people how they should be watching sports, then feel free to have at it, because as I say in the column, there is no right or wrong way to follow a sports team, in my opinion. And I see a lot of fans telling one another how to properly follow the team, whether it's on social media or message boards or any of the myriad ways in which fans can communicate with each other in 2017 and about to be 2018. When we started with all of these new mediums from which we could communicate with one another, there seemed to be a preponderance of really negative fans who just would blow up the coaching staff, administration, the guy that sells Cokes at the concession stand at Williams-Brice Stadium, anybody that they could get after a bad Gamecocks loss. And there was just a desire to play the blame game. And fans got so fed up with that now I feel like there's almost been a backlash that's just as bad. You can't, it seems like, state any opinion that's not 100% positive on a social media outlet like Twitter or a message board without getting completely blown up by what I called in the column the positivity enforcers. So I feel like we just can't seem to find a happy medium where you can talk about the team and what's happening without, fans denouncing each other publicly.
Scott Davis's new column is up on Gamecock Central right now, and the headline is the Gamecocks' New Year's resolutions. Scott, another subject that you touched on this week really resonated with me, and you talked about the recruiting saga. We all know how important recruiting is, particularly for your football program, and it's the lifeblood of college football programs across the country. We all understand that it's important, but following every turn of the recruiting process can be gut-wrenching at times for devoted fans like us.
No doubt, and I've been absolutely one of these people who's been hooked on, any nugget of information that's happening in the recruiting world, and want to state very clearly recruiting is the most important thing that you can do to build a winning college football program. So no one is denying its importance or how vital it is. If South Carolina's football and basketball teams want to become elite and stay that way, it's going to happen with them recruiting the very best athletes in the country, and not just folks from the Carolinas and Georgia. They're going to have to start making inroads all over the place. And so recruiting is hugely important, but some of these recruiting sagas are so incredible that they defy the imagination. A couple of years ago, I remember a prospect declaring that he decided to pick Auburn instead of Clemson because there was a Chick-fil-A closer to where he'd be spending most of his time in the football operations building at Auburn. So that's when I realized, if this is what decisions are being made on, and they are, by the way, you see all the time in these recruiting stories, some of the silliest reasons for why prospects end up going somewhere. And then I have no control over what's happening, and I don't need to be fretting and, sitting around looking at social media or message boards to see if a guy enjoyed his visit, because I have nothing to do with his desire to go to a particular place, and so I just need to step away from it.
Scott, I could tell you exactly when I decided to dial back my interest in college football recruiting, particularly for the Gamecocks. It was a specific player, in fact, that I was really hoping, this was 10 years ago or so, that I was really hoping the Gamecocks would sign. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Let's say it was a defensive lineman from the Charleston area, and he had narrowed his highly sought-after prospect that considered a can't-miss guy, and he had narrowed his final two schools to South Carolina and another SEC school. I thought the Gamecocks were going to get him. I was really excited about the Gamecocks getting him, and he ended up signing with the other school in the SEC, and I was bummed out. So I decided at that point that I'm no longer going to get caught up in the everyday process of the recruiting process, and I was going to wait until the signing list was official and then take a look at who the Gamecocks had and go from there. And it's made my mental health a lot better.
That's essentially what, I've been doing and hope to do more of as well. Find out who signed on signing day, see what their credentials are, what coaches and analysts are saying about them, and determine whether you think the Gamecocks pulled in a worthy class. But agonizing over how somebody's visit went in July when months still remain on the calendar before a prospect can sign. And to be honest, I'm not breaking any news here. I think this has been obvious for a while, but so many of these kids really enjoy the recruiting process. They enjoy the attention that they get. They love passing out feelers and hints and clues to get the fan bases in a whirlwind trying to figure out what they're saying and what it all means about where they're going. And the bottom line is, we just don't really know how any of these kids are going to pan out. I think the goal in recruiting, people talk a lot about whether stars matter from sites like ours and the Rivals Network. They do matter, it appears. The teams with more 4- and 5-star players typically are the ones playing for the national championship. So I think they matter, but I think that, the way I want to approach it is to look on signing day and see what the Gamecocks have compiled and then determine whether I think the program is heading in the right direction, rather than fretting, in September about whether a guy liked the music that the DJ played, when he went to Williams-Brice Stadium.
Bottom line here, Scott, the message in your column this week is just to encourage fans to be better fans in 2018, yourself included. And bottom line is that folks need to remember that these are just games and show up for the tickets that you paid for. If you got football tickets,
that is a good one, and I should have put that in there. Fortunately, if I have tickets, I'm going to the game. I'm not a guy that gets tickets and then sits on them. So, but yeah, that's another one. I think that as we've seen with the basketball attendance this season, which has been remarked upon, quite a bit. And I absolutely, if you've got tickets, try to get to the game. And if you can't, try to get them to somebody who can. But at the end of the day, I just hope fans just try to enjoy these things and not put as much emphasis on everything that happens over the course of the season. And I've certainly been guilty of doing it and will be again. But it's a good reminder for me to try to take this up a little less seriously.
Scott Davis, our columnist here on Gamecock Central. His new column is up. We hope you'll read it. Gamecock's New Year's resolutions. You can reach Scott on Twitter at SCDOnFire, but Scott may not be on Twitter as much in 2018. Scott, thanks very much.
Thank you, Emerson. Happy holidays to everybody.
Likewise. That's my man, Scott Davis, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.